The name's Marsh, Webster Marsh. I work in a big city, Boston, a thriving metropolis of steel, concrete, electricity, and light. Maybe too much light. For years, we'd burned the candle at both ends, or, in this racket, the fluorescent tube. We kept the juice flowing, and didn't ask too many questions. Then, she walked in. LED. She promised us savings, better light, and a longer-lasting bulb. The DOE got on board saying that widespread adoption of LEDs will achieve significant energy savings, cut consumer electricity bills, and reduce carbon emissions. Thing is, it took buy-in from everyone, right on down to the consumers. But it worked. Now we're on to the next aim, controls for the LEDs. I'm doing my part, designing, installing, and recommending lighting controls whenever I can. I've worked on some pretty big projects, and a lot of small ones. But sometimes, helping out a friend can be the most rewarding job of all. It was a typical winter day when my phone rang. With a swipe of a finger, I answered. "Marsh," I said. The voice on the other end was friendly, but there was also an air of business in his voice. "Webster Marsh, it's been a while. You never call anymore." There was no animosity in his voice, just fact. In my shoes, it's a hustle all the time. "Sorry," I said. "You know how it is. I can control lots of things. I just can't control time." He laughed politely, then we got down to the matter at hand. "I need your help switching out some old fluorescent fixtures for new LEDs. Half of them no longer work, and the other half hardly give a flicker. I'm hoping you might know how to change that." It's a problem I'm all too familiar with, mostly because too few know there's a better way. "There's a relaxing weekend in the country and a few meals in it for you." I looked out my window at the skyscrapers clawing at the sky, their lights washing out the stars like they had something to hide. "Yeah," I said, "I can do that." I made my way to the quaint little house in rural Vermont and got to work. Now let me say this before the story goes any further. If you're planning to do electrical work in your home or a friend's, hire a licensed electrician. Electricity is your friend, right up until the moment it isn't. Then it turns on you. First thing I did was survey the scene. The fixtures and switches were old, tired, one of them was already dead, and I had no intention of joining it. So, I made sure I shut off the right breaker. Pushmatic. Great. Pushmatic breakers are the kind of old electrical gear that make you stop and squint, like you've just found a suspect with a clean tie and dirty hands. Popular in mid-century homes, they ditched the usual toggle handle for a push-button design. One button to switch the circuit on, another to shut it down. They were built tough, with a reputation for solid mechanical action, but time hasn't always been kind to them. These days, electricians look at them with a mix of respect and suspicion. Now, a job like this goes nowhere without the right tools. So, I brought the essentials. Wire snips, strippers, screwdrivers, flashlights, connectors, the usual cast of characters. I'm never found on a job without them. Then, it was time to work on the wall switch. I removed the faceplate and made sure the circuit was dead, so that I wouldn't be. The switch looked like it had been installed during the Napoleonic era. But to be fair, they were solidly built workhorses in those days. I checked the circuit again, twice, to be sure there was no chance of finding myself getting sucker punched by our old friend Voltage. Next, it was time to test the area lighting controller. If you like to make things easy like I do, you'll like Wago connectors instead of wire nuts. Much easier, at least for this testing. These area controllers could handle full dimming, sure, but so could the lamps. That wasn't why I brought the controller into the picture. Its real job was to keep score, to meter the power slipping through the line and tell me exactly how much juice the setup was pulling. Back to the old switch. I had to ease the wires out carefully. Back then, color coding apparently wasn't part of the grand design. I tied them into the controller so I could get a read on the power draw. Just like I figured. The Retrofit was going to trim the electric bill. See, ballasts were once the hot new thing, the future in a metal box. But times change. Now they're dead weight, a brick around the neck of efficiency. Even with no lamp burning, that old ballast was still quietly skimming 5 watts of power. Doesn't sound like much until you let it run day after day, month after month. Onto the lights. I unscrewed the ballast from the ceiling and not a moment too soon. The sign of an old home, a burn mark from the ballast. I laid the fixture out on the table, doing my part for the environment. I was able to save the metal from a landfill, but I did have to cut away some of the old tangled mess of wires. Using every electrician's most valued tool, the wire stripper, I began rewiring for the new LED bulbs. Having readied the fixture, it was time to mount it back onto the ceiling. Like many homes, there is only one ladder, so you make do with a stick. Finally, I wired in the new wall switch and slid the LED lamps into place. Then came the payoff. I hit the switch, and just like that, the room lit up clean and sharp. No hum, no flicker, no tired old ballast dragging its feet behind the scenes. The place looked brighter, leaner, like it had finally shed an old overcoat full of bad habits. You can see the finished result right here. A simple retrofit, a better light, and a little less waste bleeding into the electrical bill. Not a bad ending for a day's work. The numbers told the story plain as day. The old setup was drawing about 90 watts per fixture, 80 watts from the 2 fluorescent lamps, plus another 10 watts from the pair of ballasts lurking in the background like hired muscle. Multiply that across 5 fixtures and the room was pulling 450 watts every time the lights came on. The new LED setup brought that down to 32 watts per fixture, 160 watts total. That's a drop of 290 watts, about a 64% reduction in lighting power. In other words, every time they hit that switch, they weren't just getting better light. They were cutting loose a whole lot of wasted energy that had been quietly skimming money off of the bill for years. Now, before anybody gets the wrong idea, let me make one thing clear. Toggle didn't sponsor this episode. No payoff, no envelope slid under the table, no whispered deal in a smoke-filled back room. Their lamps just happened to be the ones on the job, and I call it like I see it. Around here, the truth works for free. Well, that's the news from the city, or rather in this case from the country, where the flick of a switch tells a story. Good night.